Imagine being invited to the most exclusive dinner in London in 1600. The wine is imported, the conversation is intelligent, the guests are from the highest nobility, and the main course is your neighbor who died last week. This is not a metaphor, it was literally that. Welcome to corpse medicine, the most disgusting and surprisingly popular practice in the history of European medicine. The logic was simple, almost poetic in its insanity. If something hurts you, eat the equivalent part of another human being. Headache? Skull powder. Blood problems? Fresh blood straight from the source. It was like a spare parts pharmacy, where the stock came from the local cemetery. Doctors called this similia similibus, the principle that like cures like. Science disagreed, but nobody asked science. The menu of horror was vast. Egyptian mummies 3,000 years old were imported, ground up, and sold as powder as a universal remedy called mumia. Human fat was prescribed for joint pain. The warm blood of gladiators and recently executed criminals was drunk in public squares as an elixir of strength and vitality. There were lines. People paid dearly for it. But before you assume this was the work of some isolated lunatic in a dark basement, you need to understand the scale of what we are talking about. We are in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, educated, literate, Renaissance Europe. The same Europe that produced Leonardo da Vinci, Shakespeare, and Galileo also produced medical recipes based on ground human skull. This was not the practice of ignorant villagers hiding in the forest. It was official medicine, prescribed by doctors trained at respected universities, sold in real pharmacies, consumed by nobles, intellectuals, kings, and queens. If you were wealthy and sophisticated at that time, you had probably already taken something made from dead people and found it completely normal. The intellectual foundation of all this had a fancy Latin name, similia similibus curantur, like cures like. The central idea was that the human body, being the most perfect machine of divine creation, contained within itself the remedies for all ailments. Persistent headache? The problem was in the skull, so ground human skull powder was the logical answer. Circulatory problems? Fresh blood from a healthy human, obviously. Weakness in the bones? Human fat and marrow applied directly. Epilepsy? Blood from a strong young man drunk while still warm right after death. Doctors saw no cruelty in this. They saw logic. They saw applied science. And patients paid fortunes to access this macabre stock. The most coveted item on this menu had its own name, mumia. We are not talking about bandages and pharaoh curses. We're talking about real Egyptian mummies, 3,000 years old, being dug up in the desert, transported on merchant ships to European ports, and then ground into a dark, dense powder sold as a universal remedy in pharmacies in Lisbon, Paris, and London. Demand was so absurdly high that Egypt could not supply it alone. And when supply is small and profit is enormous, the market improvises. Fresh corpses of the poor, beggars, and executed criminals began to be smoked, desiccated, and resold as legitimate mumia. Nobody checked the origin. The business was too profitable for inconvenient questions. Ointments made from corpse fat were applied to aching joints, mixed with aromatic herbs, and sold under sophisticated names that carefully concealed the main ingredient. Buyers thought they were investing in a high-quality medicinal product, and by the standards of the time, they were. Blood was perhaps the most ritualistic item of all. Not just any blood. The most valued was that of young, healthy men, obtained preferably at the exact moment of death, still warm, still carrying what they believed to be the vital force of the individual at the instant of departure. Public executions became events with parallel market value. There were street vendors strategically positioned outside the scaffold with cups, jugs, and varying prices depending on the fame of the condemned. The crowd came for the spectacle, Some stayed to go shopping. And now we arrive at the case that transforms all of this from a distant macabre story into something disturbingly close to real power. King Charles II of England, absolute monarch, refined statesman, one of the most sophisticated rulers of 17th century Europe. This man, every morning, before any audience or meal, took what was known as the King's Drops, a special preparation developed with the help of his personal physicians, made from macerated human skull distilled in alcohol. Charles II not only consumed this daily, but took genuine pride in the recipe. He genuinely believed that mixture maintained his health, his clarity, and his capacity to govern. The man who controlled an empire took cemetery medicine every morning with the same naturalness that someone today takes a vitamin. The inevitable question is where all these bodies came from. The answer is as dark as you can imagine. Grave robbers operated as organized businesses, with routes, regular clients, and price lists. Cemeteries were invaded hours after burials, before the earth had time to settle. Wealthy families hired armed guards to protect the recently buried for weeks. Hospitals quietly sold the bodies of paupers who died without family to claim them. It was an entire supply chain, invisible, partially illegal, and widely tolerated, driven by a medical demand that polite society preferred not to examine too closely. While families mourned their dead, the corpse market ran discreetly in the back rooms of reputable pharmacies and in the laboratories of well-regarded physicians. The end of this practice was slow and quite reluctant. There was no collective moment of enlightenment where everyone looked at their own plates and had a sudden flash of conscience. It was the gradual accumulation of evidence that none of this worked, combined with the real advancement of anatomy, chemistry, and a genuine understanding of how the human body actually operates. In the 18th century, corpse medicine gradually lost credibility in serious medical prescriptions. By the 19th century, it had become an embarrassing historical curiosity. And here we are in the 21st century, looking back with a mixture of horror, disbelief, and that strange feeling that perhaps we are not so different after all. Because here's the thought that remains after all of this. We stopped eating each other, but we never stopped using each other to survive. Organ transplants, blood banks, skin grafts, donated bone marrow, heart valves from deceased donors. The central idea has not changed that much. We still depend on other people's bodies to heal our own. The difference is that today the donor consents, the procedure is based on real science, and nobody is grinding mummies in the pharmacy basement. Medicine evolved. The instinct to seek in others what we ourselves lack, that one stayed. In the next video, we will dive into another historical medical practice that will make you deeply grateful for having been born in the 21st century. You will not want to miss it. The brain is still one of the biggest mysteries. If you want to unlock more of your mind, check the first comment.